All right, today we're going to pull back the curtain on a system that affects pretty much everyone, but almost nobody's ever heard of it. It's called GxP. These are the invisible but absolutely vital rules that make sure the medicine you take is safe. So let's get into it. I mean, think about it for a second. When you take a pill, how do you actually know it's going to work? That it was made right, that it was tested properly, and that the data backing it all up is legitimate? Well, that's where this whole system of GxP standards comes into play. So, what is GxP? It's basically a catch-all term for a bunch of good practice regulations. That X you see, it's just a variable. You swap it out depending on what you're talking about. So, M for manufacturing gives you GMP, C for clinical practice gives you GCP. You get the idea? It's a whole family of rules.
Now, here's the first thing you really need to understand. These aren't just helpful hints or best practices. This is the floor. It's the absolute, non-negotiable minimum standard required by law.
And that makes them totally different from something you might have heard of, like ISO standards. See, a company chooses to get an ISO certification. It's voluntary, like getting a gold star. GxP? It is not optional. It is the law. The best way to think of it is as the mandatory building code for every single medicine, enforced by regulators like the FDA and the EMA. And the consequences for getting this wrong are, well, they're enormous. If you have a failure in manufacturing, a GMP failure, you could be looking at a factory shutdown or a massive recall. And if you mess up in a clinical trial, a GCP failure, regulators can just toss out all your data. All that time, all that money. Just gone.
So how does this all work in the real world? Let's follow a new medicine on its journey, starting way, way at the beginning, long before any human is involved. The very first guardian, our first checkpoint on this journey, is called Good Laboratory Practice, or GLP. So what's GLP's main job? It's all about making sure the earliest safety data is trustworthy. We're talking about the lab studies, the toxicology tests, the animal studies, all the stuff that happens before a drug can even be considered for people. The mission is to make sure that data is rock solid, because if it's not, regulators will flat out refuse to even look at it. The drug's journey ends right there. Game over. Okay, so if a drug makes it through that first gauntlet, it can finally move into human testing. And that's where the next standard, Good Clinical Practice, or GCP, comes in. Now, GCP has two incredibly important missions. Number one, and this is the most critical, protect the people, the human volunteers who participate in these trials. Their rights, their safety, their well-being is paramount. But job number two is to make sure the data coming out of the trial is credible and has integrity. Because, as we said, if the data's no good, the whole multi-million-dollar study is completely worthless. All right, let's say our drug was a success in clinical trials. Fantastic. Now comes an even bigger challenge, making millions of doses and actually getting them to the people who need them. This takes us to the factory floor and beyond. And this is where we meet what is probably the most famous of all the GxPs, Good Manufacturing Practice, or GMP. It is the absolute bedrock of drug production. GMP's mission is all about two words, consistency and control. It's there to ensure that the millionth pill coming off the line is identical in quality, strength, and purity to the pills used in the clinical trial. It covers literally everything, the building itself, the equipment, the staff, the raw materials. You mess this up and you're looking at serious regulatory action. We're talking warning letters, import bans, or even a total shutdown. But here's the thing. You can make the most perfect drug in the world, and it can all go wrong the second it leaves the factory. And that's why we have Good Distribution Practice, or GDP. GDP is all about the supply chain, from the warehouse to the truck to the local pharmacy shelf. Its job is to make sure the drug is stored and transported correctly. You know how some vaccines need to be kept super cold? That's called the cold chain, and that's GDP in action. It's proof that even a perfectly made drug can become useless or even dangerous if it gets too hot in the back of a truck. So the drug has finally reached the patient. The job's done, right? Nope, not by a long shot. Now the real long-term safety watch begins, and it's governed by Good Pharmacovigilance Practice, or GVP. Yeah, pharmacovigilance is a mouthful. It just means drug safety monitoring. GVP is the rulebook that says companies have to keep watching their drug safety record for its entire life on the market. They're constantly looking for rare side effects or new safety signals. If this system fails, dangerous problems could be missed, putting patients at risk. Okay, so we've looked at the different stages, but there's a kind of golden thread that runs through all of them. It's a set of rules that isn't about one specific step, but about the data, the documents, and the computer systems that everything relies on. This is Good Documentation Practice, or GDocP, and it's all built around a simple but powerful acronym, ALCOA+. It's basically a checklist for every record. Is it attributable? Do we know who did it and when? Is it legible? Contemporaneous? Was it recorded as it happened, not days later? Is it original? And is it accurate? This is the bedrock of all trust in the system. If you can't prove who did what, when, and how, then none of the other GXPs even matter. And of course, today, so much of this is digital. So how do you apply these rules to software? Well, there are two key parts. First is a framework called GAMP5. Think of it as the industry's guide to proving that a computer system works exactly as it's supposed to. Then, in the US, you have a specific law, 21 CFR Part 11. That's the FDA's rulebook for making sure electronic records and e-signatures are just as trustworthy and legally binding as a signed piece of paper. So when you step back and look at all these different G's and P's together, you really start to get a sense of the big picture and why this system is so important. GLP, GCP, GMP. None of these rules work in a vacuum. They're all connected. They create this mandatory interlocking web of checkpoints, a safety net that follows a medicine from its very first conception in a lab all the way through its entire life on the market. It's all designed for one purpose: to protect public health by ensuring our medicine is safe, effective, and high quality. And that brings us to a final thought. This GXP family isn't set in stone. It's always growing and adapting. We already have new ones popping up, like good tissue practice for cell therapies, but with technology moving so fast, with AI starting to design drugs and gene therapies becoming more common, you have to wonder, what new challenges are just around the corner? And what will the next good practice standard need to be to keep us all safe?